We wanted to position Oregon as a place where people could find happiness. This idea that, people are overworked, they're stressed, the 24-hour news cycle, the trying to keep up with your email and all of that, we just felt was just weighing on people. We thought we were well positioned to almost be the antidote to what was stressing people out.
Welcome again, everybody, to the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker. We've got another great episode for you today. A great guest, and I'm excited to have him on. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody of a couple things. First of all, reviews help us be found on iTunes or wherever you consume your podcasts. And so if you could leave us a review, if you're enjoying the podcast, please do so. We also have the Destination Marketers LinkedIn group. Please go join that group. I'm getting new requests every day, and we've got more and more people sharing and learning together, and we want to continue that community forward. And then the last thing is, if you have specific questions for me or my team about the podcast or about being a guest or a topic you'd like us to discuss, send us an email at destinationmarketingpodcast@relicagency.com, and we'll review that, and we'll try to get either your comment or your question or whatever it is addressed on the show. But without further ado, I want to welcome our guest. His name is Kevin Wright, and he is from Travel, Oregon. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I've got tons of questions, okay? But before we dive in, we're going to kind of break the ice with a couple questions we ask everybody right when they join, and that's, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oh, man, anywhere in the world. For me, let's see. Anything new for me is exciting. And I kind of like to go places that kind of align with those things I'm interested in, kind of outdoorsy stuff, skiing, fishing, camping, and that kind of stuff. I like to go to off the beaten path places. Spot that pops in my mind right now would be Kamchatka, which is a peninsula on the eastern side of Russia. There's some sweet fishing out that way.
Okay, you just told me a lot about what kind of fisherman you are, because for one, the fact that you know about Kamchatka, you are looking for giant rainbow trout, bears everywhere, and nobody around is what it sounds like to me.
Yes. And of course, when I'm not dreaming of an Oregon vacation, my mind may go to a place like Kamchatka.
I like it. Well, we said it has to be somewhere you haven't been, so it's okay if Oregon is not the destination. So Kamchatka, how did you find out about it? I mean, I have a brother-in-law that is just an avid fly fisherman, and he told me about Kamchatka. And then 4 hours later, I had watched 100 YouTube videos of people fishing in Kamchatka in Russia. How did you discover it?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think it's one of those things that's just been in the back of my mind as long as I can remember. I don't necessarily even remember when I discovered it. Maybe one of those like fly fishing film festivals or something, but I even know some folks who have been out there and done it, and I honestly can't remember, but it just looks like an amazing, pristine, beautiful place.
Oh, and you have to helicopter in, I think, right?
Yeah, it's pretty darn remote. And on a lot of ways, I think it's a lot like Alaska, but even just harder to get to and even more remote, if that's even possible.
Yeah. I mean, Alaska's already pretty remote, and this is like to the nth degree, right?
Yeah, if Alaska's too busy for you, you can head out that way.
That's your dream destination. Tell me a little bit about your favorite place you've ever actually been. And let's exclude Oregon so that you don't have to. We'll talk plenty about Oregon today.
Gosh, some of my favorite trips a long time ago out of college, I did a little tour of Europe with some friends and hit Switzerland and Germany and Austria with a local friend who was living out there. So that was pretty awesome because we had somebody local on the ground that could take us to the good stuff. Had a really great trip last summer. My wife and I were able to have the in-laws watch the kids, and we were able to go to Norway for 10 days. And that was a pretty special trip considering we hadn't been away from home for an extended period of time since our kids were born, which is about 10 years. So being able to travel around Norway for a week was pretty special.
And tell me a little bit about the attractions in Norway that are interesting for people that are maybe considering going to Norway.
I think kind of like why I enjoyed Switzerland in that. I mean, just the outdoor landscapes are just mind-boggling. These giant, massive peaks, glaciated peaks that just dive straight into the ocean and all the fjords, and the hiking was just unbelievable. And we were there in the summer, so didn't have to be too concerned about getting in before dark, because it never gets dark, so you can just keep on hiking.
Oh man, sounds like a blast.
Not to mention some good food. I like all the seafood I can eat, and they've got plenty of that there.
Okay, all right, fresh seafood and cliffs in Norway. We'll have to put that on the bucket list. Okay, so really excited to have you on. Before we dive in too far into the Travel Oregon campaign that I definitely want to discuss, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you end up in tourism? And then how did you end up in your current role, and what is it?
Sure, that's a big question. So, gosh,
it might take a while.
I'll try to give you the short end of it. Raised in upstate New York, went to college in New Hampshire, and I think like a lot of folks went to school with not knowing really what I wanted to do. So I think randomly chose a business college, and I must have been my freshman year, probably taking my first intro to marketing or intro to advertising class, where the light went off, and I was like, oh, I can market whatever I want to. And so that was a big moment that I remember. And at the time I was and still am very much into skiing, and determined I wanted to get into the ski industry. And so worked through college at ski resorts in New Hampshire, and soon after graduating college moved to Colorado and worked in the ski industry there for a little over 10 years, and had an interesting job while in Colorado. In between jobs, I worked for the Colorado Tourism Office, and don't quote me on this, probably around 2001. And interesting story that you may be familiar with, in that at the time, Colorado was the first state tourism and only state tourism office to lose their funding. And I think they lost their funding in 1993, and they had their funding reinstated in 2000, 2001. And I was the first employee that they hired. And so that was pretty cool to be part of.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to be part of a group rebuilding a tourism office. And I recall it was within economic development, and the head of economic development said, we were looking at creating an international department, and somebody said, well, you should go to IPW, the big trade show, and go find Todd Davidson, who at the time and still is the CEO of Travel Oregon, and because they know what they're doing over there. So go over there and talk to him and find out how they set it up, and that's what I did. And Todd was great, and I think we sat down for an hour or two and kind of showed me the ropes of how Oregon had structured their tourism office. And so that we took a lot of that info and helped guide our direction. So did that for a year or two, and then got back into the ski industry. And I think there was a time where my wife was like, is this it? So she worked in Denver in advertising, and I was up in the mountains, and she was looking for something a little bit more. I think she was just looking for a change and wanted to do something new. Yeah. And I think I was just getting settled, so we had a little competition. And she said, she's a city person and I'm more of a country person, and so she said, if she finds a job in a place that I like, we'll go there, and vice versa. And so we were both looking. I was looking at ski area jobs, and she was looking at places like San Francisco or New York, and she had actually gotten a great opportunity to work at Wieden Kennedy, which is a big ad agency here in Portland. And I had never been to Portland before, but I said, just knowing from what I'd heard about Oregon and Portland, I was on board with coming to this place, sight unseen, just from its reputation.
Wow. Okay, so she ended up there, and then how did you end up at the tourism office?
Right. So I guess it was maybe serendipitous having that meeting with Todd Davidson, doing the job hunt. And actually, come to think of it, I'm remembering back, it's been a while. We've been here 15 years now. So I was actually looking at ski jobs here in Oregon, but the year, 2005, I think in 2004 they had a really bad drought year. And so the ski areas were not hiring. And so for better or worse, that made me broaden my search and go back to looking at tourism. And there was an opportunity at Travel Oregon at the time in the international office or in the international department. And so came in and said hello to Todd Davidson and had a chance to hand him my resume and, went through the interview process. And then a few months later, I was a Travel Oregon employee.
No way. Wow. That's, it's always fun to hear how people end up in tourism. It's very few people understand when they're in college or early in their career how awesome the tourism industry is to work in. And, it's fun to hear how people kind of stumble their way into it. And, you worked at the Colorado Office of Tourism. I've got to imagine when you were there first, you were wearing a lot of hats since you guys were rebuilding and you were employee number one, right?
Yeah, indeed. There was a lot of committees for sure. You're right. It's such a broad industry. It's really hard, I think, if you're not in it, to wrap your head around what it is. I remember when I worked at Loveland Ski Area, I was on the local county, volunteered on their chamber board, and just terms like DMO and lodging tax and all that was just such a foreign concept. And I think if you're not in it, it is kind of like, what is this whole thing that's tourism?
Yep, there are a lot of interesting acronyms in the industry as well that I had to learn as I got in, right? So kind of fun. Hey, I am so excited to talk about your campaign. I'm just going to skip right to it if that's all right. I want to introduce everybody to why I reached out to you, and there's a little bit of a backstory here in our agency, and even a little bit of a debate that I wanted to catch you up on and have you kind of solve for us here at the agency. So that advertising is a combination of art and science, right? And it's making amazing art that actually generates revenue, or in tourism's case, generates heads and beds, right? And so when you launched your first video, the new video style that we'll talk about, and I want you to tell us all about it, my creative team immediately saw it when the press release came out and said, this is the best tourism campaign I have ever seen. And they were blown away. The unique style that you guys used for your video really struck a nerve with my team. And as they came to me, they showed it to me. To be honest with you, I was a little unfamiliar with the style that you guys went with. And so it was a little off center to me when I first looked at it. And then no question of like the quality and the ability that went into creating that. But my question for them was, well, what results have they seen so far? And they're like, well, they just launched it. They don't know. And I said, well, okay, let's pump the brakes. Let's not crown it the best tourism campaign ever made just yet. Let's see what the results are like. And so my commitment to them was, I'm going to get Travel Oregon on the podcast, and I'm going to have them talk about the amazing creative campaign that they've come up with, but then also the results that have gone along with it, so that we can decide if the art and science combination was nailed by Travel Oregon the way that we hope that it was, right?
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about like the concept to creation and then the performance of the campaign.
I guess the creation of it was, working with our ad agency and briefing the agency at the time. Like all agencies, they have a process. So we'll start with 7 pages of things that we're seeing that are trends or things that we think are important, product attributes, research, consumer behavior, blah, blah, blah. And then the agency will kind of strip that down and, we'll go back and forth for, sometimes months to get to kind of a core essence of the brief. For this campaign, all that research and intelligence boiled down to this notion that we wanted to position Oregon as a place where people could find happiness. This idea that, people are overworked, they're stressed, the 24-hour news cycle, the trying to keep up with your email and all of that, we just felt was just weighing on people. And because of the product attributes, because of this place and a lot of its natural beauty, we thought we were well positioned to almost be the antidote to what was stressing people out. And so we wanted to position ourselves as a place where people could come and find happiness.
Okay, got it. Interesting. And where did it go from there?
Literally, that's what it says. Come find happiness in Oregon. And so from there, then we start saying, all right, well, how do we bring this to life in a unique way that differentiates ourselves from the competition. And when they approached us with the idea of animation, we had no question. We were on board with it out of the gate because whether it's Disney or Miyazaki, the idea was trying to convey like a childlike wonder. You think about when you were a kid and you were watching cartoons, it just puts your brain into that natural place of innocence. And just the position or the feeling that animation conveys, we felt was great, and we loved the idea that it differentiated ourselves. Where it's something that we always work on really hard. We feel that when you look at a lot of the tourism advertising that you see in our industry, even take state DMOs for example. I mean, you've heard the kind of the cliche, if you take all the print ads from the 50 states and remove their logo and tagline, it's kind of hard to differentiate them. I mean, there's a lot of really beautiful places in every state. And so we were really excited about the idea that animation could do both of those things. It could really convey that childlike wonder, and it could really differentiate Oregon from what we were seeing out there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when you talk about how you could switch out the logo on every state ad, I mean, that really resonates with me because we work with destinations across the country, and you want to lean into what makes you unique, but the word unique is very important, right? What makes you different than everyone else? And sometimes it's really hard to find as a state what makes you different from everybody else. So I'm a big believer in using animation. We've got a client that we had on in a previous episode that it was the Wall of Bones is their biggest attraction, right? It's a dinosaur national monument is the name of it, and people come from all over the world to see it. The problem is the lighting in there is not very good, so you take a video and it looks like a pretty boring cement wall, And so we really decided to use animation to bring that to life. And so we really love using animation to differentiate. But you guys, the thing that I thought was so interesting about your spot is you took animation of the things that make you unique, and then you made them fantastical. So, a cloud became a whale floating through the sky, right? And there was kids riding a giant rabbit, for example. Just a really unique style. And maybe that's the Miyazaki film component to it. But tell me a little bit about going from like, okay, we're going to animate our attractions to we're going to turn this into this fantastical video, right?
Yeah, I think for us the main thing was when you look at the places in Oregon and the fauna and the animals, we spent an exhaustive amount of time making sure that they were real. So that animal may be 600 pounds, that rabbit may be 600 pounds, but that is an indigenous rabbit to the Willamette Valley. And the trees that you see and the flowers that you see and the bees that you see, we worked really hard to make sure that those were real, actual things. And then we just tried to layer the fantastical on top of that.
Great.
Is that a word?
Great. It is now. That's it definitely is now. We've made it. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, you worked with an agency to come up with this. And I think, look, I own an advertising agency. So if this sounds a little bit biased or whatever, I don't care. I'm just going to ask the question anyway. Sometimes it's a little scary to work with an agency, but it sounds like you guys were able to maybe get some ideas that you probably wouldn't have come up with on your own. So obviously there's pros and cons to working with an agency. And my question is, what were the benefits to you of working with an agency like Wieden & Kennedy, which, by the way, one of the best in the world. So you're definitely working with kind of the cream of the crop as far as agencies go. But what do people need to watch out for in working with an agency? And then what were the major benefits that you felt like you got from working with Wieden & Kennedy on this deal?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I think for us, we're unique in a unique situation, I think, in that we've been with Wieden over 30 years. I think we're their longest running client after Nike. And so And when I first started working on this, Dan Wyden was our creative director. So I think we're special in that, yes, Wyden and Kennedy is a great creative agency, but I think the priority that Dan Wyden put on us as a client and making sure that it was important to the agency, and I don't know if it's happened organically or that's his doing, but and I don't think they're blowing smoke at us. I honestly think that for an agency like them, for Wyden, as big as they are and the clients they have, I think it's a real treat for them to work on this business. So the folks that get on our account are super passionate and excited. So the things that Wyden is great at for us is they've just got their fingers on the pulse of pop culture. They tend to be looking around the corner as far as things, which is, from a client standpoint, can be challenging. I'm sure they pitched us ideas that we've shot down that 2 years later we're like, oh, that would have been cool. So that can be tough when they're that far ahead of the curve. So we have a really great working relationship. We have great trust. Some of the things that they pride themselves on are, again, that differentiation, making sure the creative has personality, and it's really thoughtful. So that's the pluses. I'm trying to think of things to look out for, and I think Wyden gets this. It's challenging because we do this to them, where especially a place as diverse as Oregon, we got deserts. We got the desert and the ocean about 2 hours away. So we're like, well, we got great wine and we got beer and the coffee's good too. And let's talk about outdoor recreation and arts and culture. And so I think the challenge is, to resist the laundry list ad of all of these things. And how do you come up with a concept that is going to motivate the consumer, not to understand every asset that your destination has, but just intrigue them enough to pick up the phone or go to your website to say, that's interesting. How do I find out a little bit more?
Okay, Kevin, tell me a little bit about the distribution plan you had for this campaign. What media channels were you using, online, offline, and other? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, in general, we don't have a huge geographic footprint. We do some stuff nationally on a digital level, but our big workhorse paid media, you can kind of draw a triangle from Vancouver, BC to LA to Boise is kind of where we spend a lot of our dollars. So, paid, owned, and earned. And so on the paid side, we do a lot of TV, digital, out of home, and cinema. The creative here lends itself to big moments.
What a great fit for cinema.
Owned cinema, big moments on TV. Like, I think we had our anthem, a 1:45 anthem run during the Final Four, which is the longest commercial that we've ever run on television. So trying to the bigness of the creative and trying to put it in big moments. And then on the own side, of course, we do a lot of that in-house, and we actually have some vendors as well that help us in the space. But really the goal there, we're on all the channels, but the goal was to really connect the fantastical, if you will, with the real. So, on Facebook, you might have an image of the animation juxtaposed with the real place. So that was as well as our web presence was the opportunity to say, this isn't just some crazy stuff we made up. These are real, actual places that you can visit.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And so with that fully integrated media plan, is there anything you learned? Like, was there anything that you saw early on and said, okay, we can see that this channel may not be performing the way we would like it to, and you're reallocating budget? How nimble were you with your media plan as you launched this campaign? We
always are, on some more than others. Obviously, on the digital side, there's a lot of things we can do. So we're looking at that day one and making subtle shifts there. But in honesty, I don't recall any major learnings and shifts. I'm sure there were some, but something that comes to mind was more on the creative side. In year one, if you compare year one to year two, year one was very fast and very quick cuts, and we made the anthem without necessarily thinking of the cut downs, the 6-second spots and the 30-second spots and the 5-second spots. So I always felt that our cut downs weren't as strong because we were kind of just trying to cut up the anthem spot. Whereas in year 2, we gave ourselves more breathing room with the anthem creative so that we were more conscientious about those cuts. So I think because that's a lot of what the media is behind, is these smaller segments of the anthem spot, the 6-second spots. And so making sure that those are strong, that was a learning for us in year 2.
Great. Okay, Kevin, and now for the $1 million, maybe multi-million-dollar question. Tell me a little bit about the results of this campaign. Settle the fight here in our office.
Sure, I'll do the best I can with what we know at this stage. We know that I hate to use the word, but the anthem video definitely went viral. I think it generated about 4 million views in the first week alone.
Wow.
We're looking at social performance, and I like to say that it literally went off the charts. I think the number I'm looking at is like a 2,500% increase in organic reach. And what was interesting about that is, I'm sure you guys know all this, and I've been on the soapbox talking about how organic reach in social is dead and you got to pay for it now, and being all grumpy about that. Well, this flipped all of that. All of our reach was organic. So after complaining about Facebook and taking organic reach away, I was just like, oh, okay. So now, I guess the key to that, if you want your organic reach, you just have to make a viral video.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah, so I mean, we just knew out of the gate that we had something special. The thing I think for me, not, an economic number, but what was really interesting for me was looking at the comments, on a standard paid post. I don't know, you get 10, 20, 30 comments. I think our YouTube channel has 3,000 comments on the video. And what's even more interesting is the positive sentiment that we were seeing. I think as well, in the social space, it can be a more and more negative space. But with 3,000 or so comments, it was nothing but really over-the-top positive feedback.
So not only are you getting an incredible engagement rate, but also incredibly positive engagement rate, right?
Yeah, there was a little bit of negative sentiment just from people who they were upset that we hadn't made it into a movie. But it was really great just to see how, they created a lot of hometown pride, which we're happy about. Oregonians were fired up about it, as well as visitors. I think all said and done, we picked up over 10 million views on it. And it went viral. It had a little viral outburst in Japan and China as well, with really no money behind it.
Nice.
Page views to TravelOregon.com were up 120%. We had about 1.2 million visits that we linked back to the campaign. And the true ROI numbers, we do some of this, ADAR, where we know that people booked and some of that, but it's a little bit anecdotal. For us, the true measure is we'll do an ad accountability study that is in the field right now. So if you really want to settle bets, you'll have to come back. I think in 6 months, we'll have our ad accountability study that shows the actual return on the investment, people who were motivated to travel because they saw the campaign.
Man, Kevin, would you be willing to send us kind of just a one sheet that we could post in our LinkedIn group so people could see a summary of the final results of the campaign when you're done with that study?
You bet. Happy to do that.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be fun. Well, Kevin, let me ask you this. Really, what we're measuring in destination marketing is how many more visitors did we get to the area, or how many more heads did we get in beds? Tell me a little bit about that side of the lift, the revenue side. What have you seen?
Yeah, and that's we get more of that from our ad accountability. We'll get that.
Okay.
Anecdotally, when we look at, we do have some. I just, when we look at things like with vendors like Adara that can track people who saw your ads and then booked. I have some just kind of, it's just a small portion of it, but like 20% of our buy that's trackable. That equates to about, you could put, I'd say about $500,000. We know that generated $3.8 million in revenue. But again, so in that space, it's tricky because they only track 50% of the Oregon properties. So in theory, you could say $500,000 generated, you could double it.
Right.
In theory, you could go to say that's about $500,000 generated $8 million in revenue. But, and those numbers are, it's a little, you're making some leaps, I think, there.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the problem with destination marketing in general is you can never have the direct attribution that you want. There's great tools out there like Adara and Arrivalist, but I mean, some of it you have to make a little bit of assumptions, right? And they've got to be educated assumptions. But man, it sounds like you guys are on the right track. Like as far as what you're saying to me so far with the organic reach and the engagement rate and the numbers that you're seeing as a result, I mean, this sounds like a crazy successful campaign with the data you have so far. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And yeah, like you say, that the attribution stuff, we look at it more comparative to, assess partners we're advertising with and look at campaigns over campaigns. Something else that was interesting in looking at the Arrivalist, we've always felt, as a lot of DMOs do, that it's important. You do this awareness advertising, but to get your visitor to your website is important. And we're able to quantify that through some of the research, that we saw from this campaign. Basically said 35% of the people exposed to our ad creative came to Oregon. But if someone just came to one of our channels, they were 6 times more likely to come. And those that saw an ad and then went to our website are 19 times more likely to visit. So, but yeah, we know that in our hearts that if they see the ad and then they visit your website, they're more likely to come. But for us, it was really cool to quantify that, because sometimes ad agencies might be less concerned about driving traffic to your website and just getting the awareness out there. But for us to say that, well, they're 19% more likely to come to our destination if they see the ad and then come to our website is pretty powerful information.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's fun to hear the actual performance behind the campaign, because I think it's easy to jump when you see a campaign and say, "Oh, this is a very creative and beautiful campaign," right? But when you can tie that super creative, super unique campaign to incredible results, that's when you've nailed it. And it's fun to hear how you guys, at least with the directional data you have so far, it sounds like you nailed it. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, there was one comment that I think summarized it. There was actually a few comments, but one that stuck in my mind on one of the either YouTube or Facebook. A consumer said, "I don't know what this is, but I need to visit Oregon right away."
Man, that closes the deal right there. That's great. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. I think the content we've gotten today has been super valuable. Personally, you've settled a discussion within our office of the effectiveness of this campaign. It sounds like you guys have really married the art and science to get real results from a really creative campaign. And I think it's great. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks, Adam. And for your listeners, if they want to check out how we take these anthem videos and how we roll them out during the fall campaign, we're in the midst of it right now. So you can check out traveloregon.com and see we've taken a deeper dive with some of our most famous characters from the campaign, and they're on a tour of Oregon right now if you want to check it out.
Oh, that sounds great. In fact, would you be willing, Kevin, maybe to send us, just so we don't miss anything, all the videos that you've done, and we'll post them in the Destination Marketers LinkedIn group so that people can actually see and go through all the different videos in your campaign?
I would love to.
Great. We'll do that as a follow-up. Well, thanks, Kevin. I sure appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, everybody, this has been another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. We really appreciate you listening. A little reminder, join the Destination Marketers LinkedIn group so you can make sure that you get access to content like the Travel Oregon videos that we're going to post there here shortly. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.